Why did you write this book?
This is really a continuation of a series of explorations that I began when the COVID epidemic started and everything shut down. And I spent that period of COVID isolation um, just exploring my life experiences and questions that I'd had for a long time, see where they would lead me. And it actually has turned out to be a trilogy, much to my surprise. Two, two of books of which have now been published. And the first one I called Search for Meaning in the Mystery of Consciousness. And I tried to share with readers the methodology that I followed under the guidance of G.I. Gurdjieff and Carl Jung in my own experiences as a clinical psychologist for almost half, half a century, actually. Uh, Try and share both my methodology and my conclusions about unusual experiences that so many people have that science cannot address. What are the implications of this in terms of our actual nature and our place in the universe? Then there were a lot of essays that didn't fit so much into that theme, many of which now have gone into this second book, Inside So Outside. This one is somewhat more, I guess, scientifically metaphysical kind of quality. And it focuses on an insight that I had well over 40 years ago that has turned into what my mentor called a long thought, a pondering of many decades. And it happened late one night when he was a physician, the mentor, Dr. Keith Buzzle, and we were discussing neuronal transmission, or just what happens inside the nervous system in the brain. And particularly Keith, as a physician, was talking about the nature of the synapse, the space between neurons, that the nerve cells in our body and brain, uh, they don't actually touch. There's a space between all of them called a synapse. And so the signal travels through one nerve cell, and before it can get to another nerve cell, it has to get over this space through this synapse. We didn't know a lot about what was going on there back then. We know more now, but it's even more mysterious because of what we know. So at the end of each neuron are all these little factories and these hair-like cells called dendrites, and produce, they have a whole bunch of atoms on the shelf, and they put them together, and they mix the electrons, and they come up with all these neurotransmitters that have different shapes. And then, depending on many, many factors, they are released into the synapse, which for them is very large because they're like really tiny. And they can float across the space onto the next nerve cell. And then because each one has a certain shape, they have to find that shape dock on the next nerve. It's like a lock and key. So you got to swim over there, put it in, turn it. And when enough of these in the right proportion have get across and locked, then another electrical impulse starts in the next nerve cell, and the next, and the next. It's estimated at the moment that an average brain has something like 80 billion nerve cells, and they're all working at the same time at speeds that are incommensurate with our sensory capacity to see what's going on. So this is very strange. It was at this moment we were talking about the synapse. It was in my mind. This is like 2 in the morning. I was really staggering on my feet trying to stay awake. It was so interesting. I saw in my mind visualizing this space. And all of a sudden I had this tremendous insight. It's very not so easy to talk about. The words are simple, but it doesn't make sense unless you were there. But I suddenly recognized the importance of nothing. That nothing happens without that nothing, without that space. It's like at So at the beginning of the universe, the Bible says there was nothing. It was just a void. Then poof, there was something, you know. And our Big Bang model of the universe, which may be going by the wayside now with the new results from the Webb telescope. But even that said, there was nothing. There was everything. And isn't it like that with our thoughts? You know, I'm just sitting here and an insight falls into the top of my head. Where did that come from? What's going on here? So this idea of the space became very interesting to me. And then as I was writing material for this book, I was sitting at this very desk one day, trying to see what was going on in here. And another question arose about the location of mind, which I think is chapter 3 in here. And we all know where the brain is. But where's the mind? I mean, we assume the mind is in the brain, and the mind is a result of brain activity. But that leads to this perplexing question that no one's been able to solve yet. How does consciousness arise out of inert matter? That does make sense. It's a great mystery. So I spent a lot of time looking in my perceptions about this question. I remember as a boy once looking up at a star, realizing the light from that star had traveled, I don't know how many millions of light years, 186,000 miles per second, for millions of years. I mean, that's a really big distance. And here it was on my retina. We were united. The light from that star and whatever's going on in my brain or my mind, we were one. And I thought, well, the starlight has come to me, but given my interest, are I not reaching out to the star? Have I met it part way? It's a strange kind of question, but I thought that there's some possibility of communion somehow. So this question of where's the mind located became very interesting. And I think there's a growing amount of evidence among a number of physicists who wrestle with these questions that the brain more and more seems to be more of a receiver, and that whatever the energy is that produces consciousness, brains pick up this energy, like television or computer or phone. We're being saturated with wavelengths all the time, electromagnetic wavelengths that our senses of our body can't pick up. But we can create instruments that can pick them up. So, for instance, right now, this image going out on YouTube to people, it's a signal. And you wouldn't see it if you didn't have the right instrumentation. So, given the type of brain I have, maybe that's different than my cat's brain or my dog's brain or the frog's brain, they pick up information that I don't have access to because they have different sensory organs. The world they live in is not the world that I live in. Some overlap, but a lot of difference. And I think it's that way with people also, that we really live in different worlds, attitudinally in terms of our understanding, our psychological perspective. And this is some very strange situation we find ourselves in.
Is the second book less psychological and more of a scientific discussion?
It's more in that direction than the first one. Though there's, of course, the psychological material here because I'm dealing with consciousness. And it seems to me that we're aware of these other two colossal universes, infinitely larger than we are. The one we call the outer world, or a planet around us, but even more so what we now currently call outer space. This is a big space. And this stretches, our current estimates or guesses, it's 93 billion light years in diameter is what the visible universe is. Beyond that, whatever's there, the light is so far away, it's not going to reach us. It's too far away. We're learning all sorts of things about this space. But then there's the space of the microcosmos, actually several, the world of cells, and inside that, the cosmos of atoms, and inside the atoms, the universe of subatomic particles, and maybe even below that, the what we commonly call the quantum foam, this mysterious sublevel of continuous energetic vibration out of which pop into existence particles and then they disappear, they pop and then they disappear. And then they begin to coagulate and you get an atom, and atoms coagulate, you get molecules, molecules coagulate, you get cells, cells coagulate, you get a big organ. And then those organs get together, you get a human being, or you get a moose, or you get an elephant. But inside of all of this is the space between the stars, the space between the cells, the space between the subatomic particles, the space into which these particles appear and then disappear. I think we can think about it as the same space. Now, how do we know this? Because we experience what we call consciousness and awareness of the world outside of us and the world inside of us, which is just as large and perhaps even more difficult to observe than the world outside. So consciousness can hold both these infinitely different worlds together in a mind. Does that make consciousness bigger? Does that mean that everything is contained in consciousness? Does that mean that consciousness, I think maybe, be interesting to look for consciousness as a quality of the space. Cosmologists, now long ago, it was assumed that there was some invisible, something called the ether, through which light and vibrations could travel in outer space. Couldn't find the ether, so they decided it was a vacuum. Now we're coming back around to a different point of view related to the former, that every cubic Planck length of space, the tiniest little piece of space you can imagine, is just chock full of all sorts of potential energy. The whole universe, everything is just energy, taking form, dissolving, merging with this energy, that energy, upgrading, downgrading. It's a colossal energy transforming machine at multiple levels of cosmoses, each one infinitely larger or smaller than the adjacent one. And yet somehow they all fit together and all interact with each other. And at least we're aware of them because they come together in the field of consciousness, or the space of consciousness.
What is the theme of the third book in the series?
The third book in the series is going to be less for the spiritually oriented public in general. It's going to focus more on what I personally have learned, my mistakes and my discoveries through well over now 4 decades studying the ideas and system of G.I. Gurdjieff. It's not limited to pupils of that system, because I think my experience is that many spiritual systems have overlap. So people who've studied Zen or Buddhism or some other tradition will discover, if they read this book, similarities in questions and challenges that they experience going through their process of inner discovery. So the book is really oriented towards a more practical exploration of the challenges and difficulties of inner spiritual work. based on my own mistakes and discoveries, which may not be shared by others. Maybe they're, I don't know. I can only speak myself. I try very hard not to speak for other people, especially not for Gurdjieff. So it's my impressions, but in a way I think about it as in the Gurdjieff training, it's traditional to get together in groups on a regular basis and share impressions with each other, what you saw inside yourself and uh, what you learned about the system and how it operates. People are often given a specific uh, task or something to try during the week and then come back and report what they discovered. So in a way, my attitude about the book is I'm just sharing with whoever wants to read it my impressions about uh, this really, really interesting um, approach to the question of the possibility of a higher level of development for human beings.
Okay, so finally, what are your hopes? Are you hoping in one way or another to attract um, or inspire people towards the Gurdjieff work and what you devoted your life to?
Um, my primary wish is to show people the possibility that what they're looking for in terms of the great mysteries actually resides inside themselves. The data is already there, and it is possible to have experiences that illuminate these great questions inside oneself. That's the primary thing. Uh, if they want to pursue that through the Gurdjieff work or Buddhism or Catholicism, whatever, it's all in all the great traditions. My own personal preference is for the Gurdjieff approach um, because I've found it in some ways really concrete and practical. Uh, and many other approaches are more vague for me, less specific. So this is my personal preference, and I certainly would encourage people to look at it.